Good afternoon, Miss Khoo and fellow classmates. I'm Gui Jing and some of my group members, Gui Mei, Irene, Sandhya and Sophia. And today we'll be presenting to you an analysis on General Motors or GM for short. On how they approach, on their approach in managing a crisis involving faulty ignition switches. And then in comparison to GM's approach, right, we'll be bringing in another case study of BMW to demonstrate how prompt responses in the automobile industry can minimize losses and damages to a company's reputation. And I shall now move on to introduce the case study to give you a better idea on what has been happening. So GM has been dealing with an ongoing worldwide ignition switch recall. The fault in ignition switch can lead to stalling of car and also the disablement of airbags. And this could lead to driver's death, like the worst case scenario. And the affected car models were in production in the years between 2003 and 2011. 13 deaths and 31 crashes discovered in 2013 led to the recall. And the recalls took place in 2014, and the matter was only brought to the public's attention when Mary Barra was appointed the new CEO in 2014. And this whole incident spanned over more than a decade because the problems with the ignition switch first surfaced in 2001. And who were affected? This incident affected several car companies such as Pontiac, Saturn, Hummer, and Ford. And also, GM employees, 15 engineers and product managers were fired in their part of not reporting or fixing the defect. And last but not least, car accidents victims. As of March 2015, 67 death claims and 113 injury claims have been approved for compensation. And here's a video to help you better understand the consequence of the fault in the ignition switch. The fault in the ignition switch seems very minor, but it's accompanied with a disastrous consequence.
What has happened, in the last 12 months with the General Motors recall?
Well, this is a situation which is very serious and has threatened the safety of drivers, not only in GM vehicles, but in any other vehicle on the road which might be struck by a GM vehicle. There was a very serious problem with the ignition switch and the coil. It was a pretty small problem, but it has very catastrophic consequences. And GM engineers knew about this problem, yet failed to remedy it. And essentially, the coil can become the car can be cut off when the spring does not properly work. It's something as simple as if a driver has a lot of keys or a lot of things on their key ring that will weight the ignition down, and that actually will turn the car off. Or it's in a lot of these small GM vehicles where the passenger compartment is pretty small and their knee might hit the key. The ignition switch will turn off, disable the vehicle, so you lose steering and the airbags are disabled as well. And they essentially become missiles out there on the highways. And so this is really the background of the story that we've been monitoring on this program and in our law practice.
Okay, so before I move on, do you all need any clarification of the video? Like the technical aspects? Okay, if you don't have, then I'll move on. And so this is a timeline of what has been happening throughout the last 14 or 15 years. The prominent events, and my groupmates and I will be going through them in greater details. And starting with 2001, where problems with the ignition switches during pre-production of the Saturn Ion, which is the discontinued car model, were first identified. GM was quoted to have resolved the problem with a design change, and they carried on the production despite knowing of the problems without adhering strictly to the protocol. And this showed that they acted minimally to protect the customers from danger. And quoting the words of Chicago Tribune, in conventional testimony, GM revealed it had known of problems since 2001, but it was either erroneously corrected or remained underreported. And this could be due to the cost culture that GM had then, because repairing would incur them a cost of 90 cents per unit. And apparently the company's benefit took precedence over the safety of the customers, and this showed that they had pro-business ethics, which showed the company was profit-oriented and more concerned with their own image at the expense of their customers' life. And so belatedly reporting or suppressing the problem from the customer would potentially evoke goodwill and showed that the company have little regard of their customer safety. And apart from lacking business ethics, the transparency within the company was absent too. Not only was the matter poorly communicated to the customers, the staff in the company were not fully aware of the problems as the matter was not responsibly reported to the relevant people in charge. So the problems were not remediated effectively. And now I will pass on to Santhia to analyze the events that took place from 2002 to 2005.
Thank you for your So now I'm going to talk about the sequence of the major events that has happened from 2002 to 2005 during the GM crisis, followed by the problems that we have identified and our analysis of it. So in 2002, car ignition parts were approved despite not meeting the safety standards. And this leads to what happened in 2003, a Satan iron, which is a type of car model, was stopped. There was investigation carried out, however it was quickly closed after the replacement of the key rings. And in 2004, GM was finally aware of the defect in the Chevy Cobalt. However, they did not issue a recall or do anything to rectify the problems. This leads to the first death victim in 2005. And the cause of the death was because of the faulty ignition parts found in Chevy Cobalt. Oh yeah, and to add on, in 2005, despite the first death victim, it did not serve as a wake-up call for GM to issue a recall of the defected ignition parts. So we have identified that there was a major communication error or issue where the wrong choice of words such as customer convenience was used to report the ignition switch problem to the higher management level. And based on a Valuka report and a Fox review, it was revealed that when customer convenience was cited to raise the attention to the critical safety issue to GM, it gave an impression that the problem was a minor problem, and it was only a minor problem that annoys the driver, instead of a major safety issue that is fatal and could potentially kill people. Hence, it was not labeled as an urgent safety problem that needs to be rectified on first hand. And to add on, the choice of words GM employees were trained to use when speaking about safety issues were misleading and not reflective of the actual scenarios. So for example, instead of the word problem, they were instructed to use issue, condition, or matter. And instead of defect, employees use does not perform to design. This leaves a lot of room for interpretation as to whether the safety issue is urgent. And finally, let's move on to the analysis. So there was definitely a misrepresentation of the severity of the safety defects, such that it attribute it to a minor problem. And it was also inappropriate to communicate an urgent issue with the usage of words like condition and matter, as they connote a more indirect and a neutral meaning. And because of this evoked little sense of urgency as compared to the word used like problems. So when the clarity of the communication is being compromised, there will be an absence of urgency and accuracy in transmitting the information throughout the whole organization. Hence, there was a lack of proper resolve and untimely action taken. So what GM could have done was that they could encourage ethical behaviors among the employees by allowing them to express this agreement openly. So for example, when they were briefed about the choice of words, if the employees think that it is inappropriate or they disagree with the choice of words, they could raise it up openly. And also by displaying honesty and integrity when reporting the incident, will facilitate a clearer communication throughout the whole GM, and hence they would have prevented this tragedy. Now I'll pass it on to Irene.
Thank you, Sandhya. Okay, so now I'll be talking about the events between 2006 to 2013. So in 2006, GM has decided to redesign the ignition switch, and they did not change the part number. So most of the employees was not informed of the change. So in 2007, GM had meeting with their safety regulators, and only this year then they know about the incident, the fatal crash back in 2005. So investigation was proposed that then the National Traffic Safety Administrator, they came down, they did investigation, and then they concluded that there was no correlation between the airbags deployed and the car crash. So in 2008, the contractor, the NHTSA contractor, they told the GM safety regulators that the crash was due to the ignition switch that they had notified the dealers about in their service bulletin. And since the regulators, they know about the incident, but they did not report it to higher management, so they did nothing about it. Then in that same year, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. Then the government billed them at 17.4 million, and that amount was shared between Chrysler also. So in 2009, they had replacement of a CEO, a temporary CEO. Then in that year, they looked into the black box data for 14 crashes, and half of the crashes were due to the ignition switch in the accessory mode. And in this year, they filed for bankruptcy in June. They got out of bankruptcy in July. That's very fast. Then in 2010, due to high incident of accidents and complaints from the public, the NHTSA investigator decided to go down to GM again to do a check and thorough investigation. And again, there was no correlation between the airbags failure and the car crash. And then in 2011, GM assigned their engineers to do a thorough investigation of the crashes. And 1 year later, they concluded that the crash was because of the ignition switch, which was out of the run position, which causes the car crash. And this only happens in car models from 2007 on or earlier. And in 2013, GM hired external engineers to do a thorough assessment. So someone has suggested them to do a recall of their cars, but they didn't do anything about it. Then by the end of 2013, there were 31 crashes and 13 deaths due to the ignition switch. Okay, so now I'll be talking about the analysis of the events. So the first one will be transparency. So the higher management, they made changes to the ignition switch without telling their employees about the change. And so without telling them, they don't know which part to put in, which part to discard. Then they cannot do anything about it. So they waited for 2 years to come clean to the employees about the fatal incident that happened in 2005. And then for the next point, high context culture. So because there are about 300,000 people working in GM and 30,000 people in the engineering department, it's inevitable to have miscommunication. So these people may be working in a high context culture. High context culture meaning when they have a problem, instead of solving it, they compromise it, and then decisions are only made by higher management. And high context culture, it allows for a lot of underlying assumptions among the employees, and there will be miscommunication when this happens. So message needs to be more clearly conveyed to the different levels of employees to minimize miscommunication. The next point will be lack of accountability. So when employees fail to update their manager or higher management about the situation, this will lead to poor crisis management. And when this
this will not trigger the higher management to look into the problem. So then the last point will be concept of time. So in 2013, the head of NHTSA, they actually they comment about the GM employees, saying that they are slow to communicate, slow to act, and at times they are inconsistent, and they lack of coordination on recall. Can you go back? Okay, so this shows that the employees in GM has a poor time management, or rather they are just waiting for instructions from above. So the third and fourth point, lack of accountability and concepts of time, they caused a lag in resolving the problem, and therefore it resulted in a snowball effect down the decade. So now I'll be passing my time to Queen.
Thank you, Irene. Okay, so now I'll be talking about the events that took place in 2014. So early in the year, 15 January, there is a change in the management. A new CEO took over, and her name is Ms. Mary Barra. Ms. Barra is not new to the company. In fact, she has been working in General Motors for over 33 years as a Vice Executive President for Global Product Development, Purchasing and Supply Chain. She made a decision which should have been done 1 decade ago, and that is the recall of the vehicles with the faulty ignition switch. At the congressional testimony, she also made a public apology and promised that she will be as transparent as she can with regards to the company's operations as long as she is in control. In addition, she also personally visited the victim's family and to offer condolence and then as well to listen to their concerns and to see how she and the company can help them. The apology, however, did not elicit a very good response. This is understandable because lives have already been lost, and it took 1 decade